Steve Smith, and welcome to a Wired Family Update. You know, often during my social media presentations for adults, at least one parent comes up to me and asks me about Fortnite, the hit video game that's produced by Epic Games. So I think it's about time we try and give it just a quick overview. But first, let's address what's really happening in the overall area of video games. You know, based on trends over the last few years, first-person shooter video games have become really popular. And what does that mean? Well, they're called FPSs, but it's a video game genre that's centered around weapon-based combat from the perspective of a first person. In other words, you experience the action through the eyes of the protagonist or the main character. These games have also become spectacular sports. Just as people are willing to watch grown men run through tacklers or hit a tiny ball off of a tee, today's digital games are growing fans by the thousands. Just look at these pages from Twitch. Now, Twitch is kind of the epicenter of video games. They're filled with digital stars with names like Myth, MTash, Lulu Lovely. Millions follow these stars, and there's sponsorship money for many of them through companies such as Gillette, Intel, and others. Now, a word of caution, if you're offended by foul language or sexual innuendo, tread softly. Both the live and recorded video feeds can be R-rated or maybe even a little worse. Today, even auditoriums are filled with spectators watching their favorite gamers battle in the equivalent which might be considered a bowl game. Similarly, Fortnite is growing in such popularity among both young men and young women. And so is its competitor, PlayerUnknown's Battleground, better known with teens as PUBG, as you can see here on this YouTube feed. Now, like many games, Fortnite has a dystopian theme, in this case set in contemporary Earth, where a destructive storm causes 98% of the world's population to disappear. These zombie-like characters rise to attack the remainder, which might include you or your child if you're playing along. Players can work together or on missions which involve randomly generated maps. Your objective is to fight the storm, protect the survivors, while building weapons to engage in combat. The adoption of Fortnite seems to come out of nowhere, as word basically traveled from word of mouth on school buses, lunchrooms, study halls, by teens across the globe. In a recent February 26, 2018 article by Mac Ashworth, he suggested that the most recent high total of concurrent users on Fortnite was 3.4 million. That means all playing at the same time. On PUBG, but their high was 3.2 million. So it's really kind of close to a toss-up on user count between the two. However, this chart from App Annie shows the download rating compared to most other games and apps during the March and early April 2018 time period. Fortnite was almost number one. A few times it kind of dropped to number two, but for the most part, number one app. Now, is it violent? Yeah, it is violent, but in kind of a cartoony way. Unlike other games such as Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, these characters are far less real. Thus, there's not really the kind of the blood and guts that we've grown accustomed to in other games. For example, these clips are taken from other video games that are far more realistic, far more violent, and far more highly sexualized. Now, should parents be concerned about video games like this? Well, the American Psychological Association said in their July 2016 guideline on media violence in video games, there is convergence of research findings across multiple methods and multiple samples with multiple types of measurements demonstrating the association between violent video game use and both increases in aggressive behavior, aggressive affect, aggressive cognitions, and decreases in pro-social behavior, empathy, and moral engagement. However, in a CNN interview, a contrary view was cited by Dr. Whitney DeCamp, who's an associate professor of sociology at Western Michigan University, who suggested that the evidence points to either no relationship between playing video games and violent behavior or an insignificant link between the two. DeCamp went on to say, basically, by keeping young males busy, well, you keep them off the streets and out of trouble. I guess that's one way to look at it. So what's my perspective? I'll give you my ice cream analogy. You wouldn't let your kids eat ice cream daily, every day for many years. You know it's not good for them. However, every child that does will not necessarily have troubles such as type 2 diabetes, but some will. As adults, we know it's not good to eat that much ice cream, so you step in. But a little's not so bad. However, there are individuals who are genetically predisposed to get type 2 diabetes if they don't monitor their sugar intake. And so they have to be careful. Similarly, in our digital world, we need to manage our kids' digital diet. As parents, we need to better manage what games kids are playing. But more importantly, how long are they playing them? With whom? And where? In other words, you got to be a parent. Some children might be environmentally or maybe genetically predisposed to acting out violently. Exposure to violent video games through excess hours playing them might exasperate such actions. There's one other issue that is being studied that relates to both social media and video games, and that's blue light. In a recent study published by Harvard Health Publishing, researchers said a Harvard study shed some light on the possible connection to diabetes and possible obesity. The researchers put 10 people on a schedule that gradually shifted the timing of their circadian rhythms. Their blood sugar levels increased, throwing them into a pre-diabetic state. And levels of leptin, a hormone that leaves people kind of feeling sluggish after a meal, that went down. The report went on to say that in another study of blue light, researchers at the University of Toronto compared the melatonin levels of people exposed to bright indoor light who were wearing blue light blocking goggles to people exposed to regular dim light without wearing goggles. The fact that the levels of the hormones were about the same in the two groups strengthens the hypothesis that blue light is a potent suppressor of melatonin. Other studies suggest that blue light might increase the risk of macular degeneration as well. Who knew, right? These are things we wouldn't necessarily correlate with one another. Clearly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in understanding how technology impacts our lives. But now let's turn our attention back specifically to Fortnite. Is Fortnite really destroying schools, as you might have heard on some news reports? Well, probably not. But there certainly is a concern. There's not a school where I've spoken where a teacher hasn't mentioned the issue concerning the amount of time students dedicate to this game. In fact, one teacher, identified only as Mr. Hillman, wrote to the game's developers requesting that they post the following note on Fortnite when kids log into the game. And it says, Mr. Hillman says, stop playing in class. Fortnite actually honored his request. And as of this recording, many kids were greeted with his words when they logged in to Fortnite. Now, here's my 60-second rundown of parents' most pressing questions. Are there things my kid might be buying within this game? Yep, that's right, there are. These include upgrades, costume skins, and other items. How long does it take to play the game? Typically about 20 minutes unless you get killed early on. What platforms can you play Fortnite on? Well, there are several. It's available on Xbox One, Mac, Windows, PlayStation 4. However, you'll also need access to the internet to play, and a mobile version for both iOS, meaning Apple, and Android now exists, but limits the number of players. Can players chat with each other online? Yeah, they certainly can, using both voice and on-text screens, but this is not good for the younger crowd. Believe me, there's lots of profanity. And can I turn chat off? Yeah, you simply use the settings on the main Fortnite page. And what is Fortnite Battle Royale? Well, most kids are now playing the Battle Royale version of Fortnite, which is really a free multiplayer offshoot of Fortnite. Up to 100 people can participate in a match together. You're basically dropped onto the game map, and then you compete to be the last one standing by killing everybody else that's playing the game. And what is Save the World? Well, Save the World is a solo game of Fortnite, and I would say probably a lot of kids are playing that. Well, I almost made the 60-second mark for this review. Well, the lowdown on Fortnite, it's a first-person shooter game that has lots of violence, but it's tame when compared to other games. It's a bit addictive and requires parental supervision concerning the amount of time that your child plays, where they play it, and with whom they're playing. If you're ready to help manage all those things, you ought to be good to go. If not, just like all things in life, don't deliberately place your child in a position to make a bad decision. Well, thanks for joining us today, and please consider sharing this video with a friend or family member that you feel it might help. And for more information, go to awiredfamily.org or email us at stephen@awiredfamily.org.